Hello, everybody. Cannada Say Pakistan, as in Faheem and Shamoon Ali, here now. Basically, from last few weeks, due to the busyness and loads of other things, we hasn't done a program. And today, we quite privileged. We have one of our friend who's actually quite expert, which is we're gonna do ask him what does he do, then our viewers can really see what his specialities is. So we're gonna really ask him that question. But before we do that, Shamoon, what we're thinking, the subject we choose last time, if you recap the subject with the Nadeem Qureshi, in fact, Nadeem Qureshi will do his introduction, recap the subject, and then we'll take a break and then come back to the subject. Ji. So,
Okay.
yeah, Shamoon, you
Yeah,
take it.
just give me 2 minutes. There's somebody at the door.
Okay, no
Okay.
problem. No
So I'm
worries.
just going to recap what happened last time. Basically, last time we discussed about relationships, how men in general view the relationship, and how society is silent and the discussions are not being done in regards with how men think about their relationships and how they feel and how they view things happening in their marital lives. We also discussed a little bit about the Islamic point of view of four marriages and discussed how men tend to basically be genetically designed in such a way that they have this urge to look at women, but that doesn't necessarily mean that they're bad men, or not every man looking at the woman means it's negative, right? It's a matter of men learning to control themselves, making sure that they're making an active effort not to do such things that are socially unacceptable or distasteful. So, going with that point, I think we would be continuing today the discussion about how men view their lives, how men view their relationships, and what are actually the needs of generally like of a man in a relationship, and how it is or it is not um, accomplished through the relationships in today's age.
So it's
So
needs of a man, the needs of both partners, both people in a marriage.
Nadeem,
well,
what we actually choose, how men thinks about their relationship and what they expect from their wives, right? Which is we can go crossroads and do
we would
overall.
probably, yeah, we would probably have some discussion so that we can get an idea as to how women see it. But obviously, like the topic today we are discussing is mainly from the men's perspective, so that women that are watching the show and men that are watching the show can get a picture of how they can vocalize. Men can vocalize how they feel, and women can see without men talking to them how they might be feeling, so that they can understand and analyze their husbands and brothers and fathers.
Yeah.
What we'll do here now, I think, Nadeem, I personally think, I know you very well, probably Shamoon is doesn't. So you introduce yourself as a profession. You have loads of your expertise. You've been an ex-counselor, been an ex-executive of a lot of firms. So just introduce yourself a little bit. Then at least our viewers can really value your prospect because you have your experience behind. So please, Nadeem, introduce yourself.
Do you want me to do it now?
Yeah, Nadeem, if you
Sorry,
introduce it, then
sorry.
we'll take a break after that.
Then we're not live yet at this moment in time.
We are live, Nadeem.
We are live.
Yes,
Okay.
live.
Okay. Hey, folks, I'm new to this, so just bear with me. All right.
Yeah, no
Okay.
problem. We are live, and we've been live for
We're
the last
live.
5
Well,
minutes.
my background is basically in local government as well, but organisation management for the last sort of decade or so. I've been a management consultant, and I specialise in particular leadership development within organisations, and both within organisations and individuals. I have my own company called Harvey Ross Consultants, and I'm the managing director of that. So, and through that, I've just newly set it up, actually, rebranded, and we're just looking to help organizations in terms of managing their organizations better than they are now. But my past experience, I've worked as a chief executive of a regeneration program where we've had a £70 million budget to be able to regenerate rundown area in Bradford. In fact, I worked as a chief executive on two of the areas in Bradford. So that's certainly part of my own sort of leadership experience, if you like, which has put me in a very good stead as a management consultant, so I can advise other organizations on some of the things not to do whilst they're managing an organization and how they can be better successful. Other areas I've spent mostly in local government as a senior officer, mostly around project management and making sure things happen. And certainly, as you know, in local government, policies made by councillors and elected members. And it's our job as officers to ensure that that policy is implemented. And part of my role in local government has always been to ensure that policy is implemented through projects and running pilot projects, testing the policy, etc. And so yeah, I've had a quite varied experience in that respect. But certainly now I try and help other organisations with their issues as well, and look at. And I think key to a lot of the problems with all the organisations is leadership. And so I've thought I've made it my own mission to be able to understand that subject really well and have had sort of experience of it myself. So in good stead to help other organisations and people. And in fact, even on the topic today, in terms of men's perspective, or men's side in terms of marriage, sort of in a marriage context, that's also requires a bit of leadership. And so it'd be interesting to see and hear from Shamoon and hear from Faheem how they their views as well. Okay.
Right. Okay, that's very good. Basically, what we really want to do, all our viewers, they can understand we have somebody who's quite professional, who's sitting here, who has his tons of experience, and obviously we're not talking about his profession. Probably later on this stage, some of the time, we'll talk about his achievement and his roles and things like this. But today's subject is, as in Shamoon choose, how men's think about women's how they want to be when they're part of a relationship, how women should be. But what we'll do, we'll come back to subject. We'll take a small break, and then we'll straight away come on to our subject. Thank you, and Nadine, to introduce yourself. We'll take a break and then come back. Thank you. We've done the break. Now, Shamoon, obviously, you is the one who chose the subject. And you want to start ask these questions to Nadeem. What does he think about it? So I'll let you start that.
Sure. So based on experience that I heard from Nadeem, this is by the way, first time we are meeting. It's great to meet you to begin, and it's a pleasure to be able to talk to you. So what I wanted to find out, based on the experience you have told us about, your background and skill sets, I think it's very relevant to our topic because obviously organizations nowadays are not just men. Organizations have men and women, and it has close tight relationship. The majority of people spend more time at work than they do at home. So it does resemble as to what happens at home. So it's kind of like home is kind of like a mini corporation in a way. So your experience obviously is going to be very relevant to this. So tell us, in your experience, what you have seen in terms of men being able to communicate to women about their perspectives of point of views or feelings?
Yeah. I think in a work situation, the biggest difference is that in terms of equality measures, both men and women are expected to behave in a particular way because there's a policy in place which is there to make sure there's no unfair play, there's no harassment, and so both genders are very aware of that. So they tend to behave in that way. I think what's interesting is when they go home, because those policies then don't apply anymore, and it's a free for all, basically. So in terms of some of the women that might be really good at work, they may not be good at home, and same with some of the men may be really good with relationships at work, but when they go home, it's a totally different picture because certain things don't apply as they do in the home. So in the home, I think sometimes, but in terms of men in particular, because we're looking from men's perspective, I think in men in particular, when they go home, there's quite a lot of expectations, and if they've had a hard day, there's almost an expectancy of the partner to be able to realize and appreciate that. And it's at the cost of not realizing that the other person, their wife or their husband, may have also had a very hard day when they came home, or the wife may have had a hard day when she came home. I think men have a kind of a generally speaking, men sort of feel, like women will probably sort of say, you're not going to get another woman like me before when there's something going wrong. The man will think of himself as unique, and so therefore he has these expectations. His wife needs to be able to cook, she needs to be able to clean, she needs to be able to go out to work, she also needs to be able to know how to look after the children, she needs to be a superwoman, right, to meet his expectations. So as a man, man feels he's God's gift to this woman, right? So he's God's gift to this woman, and why is this woman not appreciating me, right? So the man has this expectation, and the woman's thinking, what, I'm doing all this work.
Can I just come in? Just
yeah, you can.
Nadeem, can I come in and I just instigate that? Okay. That's what definite. Nadeem is from the Asian background and being a Muslim brother. Right?
No, it's actually
no. Hear me out.
It actually goes on other cultures as well. This is from Western culture. This research.
This is why I'm bringing it in, right? Okay, I'll bring it to both of you because you actually a bit more prone to the Western culture than I have, right? So I'm just really, I'm just saying it, okay? I'm just really saying here now. Nadeem said this is what men expect, right? Okay, but I found this is basically mainly the Asian housing, something to do with our Asian culture. We expect everything is smooth lining and everything else. Might be small part of some Western culture, but what I see in Western culture, clarify me. What I see in a Western culture, what I see, women's are actually they do whatever they likes to do. I seen loads of men that do cooking themselves and help the wife and things like this because their culture doesn't demand that. But what Nadeem saying, this is really news for me, is the being an Englishman or the Western culture man expecting the same thing for a woman. What we can Asian men do? You both of them clarify me. This is news for me.
Well, I'll tell you this, just to clarify. We tend to think that because we are South Asian, our culture is like this. But reality is, you can go Filipinos, you can go Italians, you can go Russians, you can go Japanese, right? Any of these cultures are same.
The same.
Everywhere you go, even in the North American society, right? You have men that come home and they have certain expectations from their wives, right? Now the society has changed, and obviously men in these societies have grown with those changes much faster or much earlier than the rest of the regions. I would accept that. But If you take a South Asian man that's grown in this culture, they're more likely to understand this. The idea is not that they don't expect to have all these things done by their wife. The idea is like, for example, if a man washes a dish, he's going to tell his wife, no matter which culture he's from, hey, by the way, I washed all the dishes. If a woman washes a dish, it's just done because it's part of her job, right?
Yeah, I want
He's not
reward.
expected to say anything.
I want a reward here. I washed the dishes.
Exactly. So it seems like a minor difference. Yes, there are men that actually stay home. There are men actually that are taking more maternal type roles, which is like unfair to say it that way, but it's maternal, historically maternal type roles, which is cooking, cleaning, taking care of the kids. And there are families where women are working and men are staying home. It is true in the society in current day and age, right? But we're talking about majority. We're talking about most men, what they expect, no matter which culture they're from, and what they do is something different. So what I'm understanding Nadeem's statement is about what their expectation is. So
Yes,
why
that's
don't
right.
we now come to what they actually do?
Sure. I think on one extreme, some women face they can't do anything right for wrong. So there's a saying in Punjabi, you can't move whilst you're doing the flour for the chapati. So you can't even move doing that. So there's a saying in Punjabi, and that's quite relevant. Some men are very, the woman can't move for doing anything. She can't do anything right, and she's always going to be reprimanded.
I'll just
And so that's one
make
extreme.
it easy for you.
Yeah, no, it's
Punjabi.
one extreme. It's
No,
one
no,
extreme.
it's
So there's another
aata
extreme.
gundi hildi kyun hai? That's just you can,
Sorry.
now in Punjabi is saying aata gundi hildi kyun hai?
Yes, thank you. It comes better from you. Okay. It just would not have sounded right from me. Anyway, okay. So the thing is that there's that kind of one extreme is that where you have that, and I think there's an expectation. There's also in terms of how it might have happened is because that male has not always been a male. He's not been an adult all the time. He's not always been married, but he's grown up in that particular way. And how is he being allowed to have those kind of attitudes is the big question. The other way where my thing in terms of leadership comes in is a leader's job is basically a leader is anybody who's an individual who basically says enough is enough. I'm going to do something about this. I'm going to make things better, right? And that's where the leader's thought starts from. It's in his or her head. They think, no, this has got to stop. We know what is right, and we're going to put things better. We're going to put things better for all of us, right? Not just for me, but for my wife, for my children, everybody, right? And that's when leadership starts, with the male, and that's what that person really needs to do. Now, in order to get them to realize that, sometimes it's not very easy because they've been brought up in a particular way. They've had layers upon years upon years upon years of one type of behavior that's been reinforced by the family they came from, right? So it's very difficult to actually all of a sudden overnight to expect them to completely change, unless of course there's a law and the police sort of come into a household every time and they sort of say, right, you got to stop doing that, and or we're going to put you in a jail, so now they do that, when domestic violence happens. Now the police come over and they actually take you away, and they'll do that. So that does happen, but in other things it doesn't happen. And so therefore those attitudes that are being developed, they take a bit of time to get over, and so sometimes you may need a third party to intervene. Now, in the old days, we sometimes criticize the way that the old people worked, or the old folk. And traditionally, what used to happen in Pakistan, they used to have a third party. And I remember my father, he used to do this. He used to be the old marriage guidance counselor, or the relationship fixer if a relationship broke down. So there was a third party. Basically, the principle was a third party was involved that would try and reconciliate and try and change some of those attitudes as well, because they were the voice of experience. They'd seen life, and usually those were elder people that went in and did the reconciliation. They usually used to sort of say, we'll call the elders in, because it was expected that the elders were more wiser they'd seen life, they knew what the right attitudes were, and so they could advise better. So I remember now we've lost all of that with the new age. We've lost all of that. Now some of that, it's not been good. I think some of what we've lost we should have kept, but in the modern age it's gone. So now we have to rely on organizations like Relate or any other marriage guidance counselors. A third party comes in, and sometimes it's friends. If the couple's lucky, friends and relatives come in. But sometimes beforehand, if you're good parents and you know before a marriage, or if you're the parent of one of the wife or the husband, you can say you need to intervene, and if you know what's right, you need to advise them in the right way. Okay, and so, but still, it's a third party coming in, and my motto is always, why do you let it get to that stage where there's a communication breakdown between husband and wife? If there's a communication breakdown between, that dictates to me when a third party enters the conversation, that means that it's a serious communication breakdown. Why has that communication breakdown happened in the first place? Why has that gap allowed to exist between the husband and wife, for that they can't communicate with each other in a way that they can
Nadeem, can I come in? I'm just really, because Nadeem has been very experienced person, as in being a professional person, right? Okay, and I can understand what he's trying to say, how we can resolve rather than leave things on that way. The whole purpose of our discussions, I think Nadeem, me, and Shamoon, they're quite modern way of thinking, and probably they understand things a lot better than other people's. A whole purpose of my program with this, there's a lot of Asians who doesn't understand that. They have these old values. They need to find some kind of answers in there, which is obviously Nadeem is going in details. Reason why I'm not want to go into details, because that's apparently another program how we can resolve things. The whole program is today how the men's think, and when we put a positive point, how we can really make a change in their mind, what they do. At the same time, how man's expect for his wife, and most of the wives they need to look into it. What is the man's going through, right? Okay, they need to understand as well, because it's not one way issue; it's two-way issue. Unfortunately, because we don't have any woman here, so that's why we really talking as a man. So we thought put our point of view across. So Shamoon, what I understood for all you two discussion here, the Western society is not much of a change. The Western men's also expecting their women's do all the housework, because they think is their domain. Their domain is doing the housework. Man's domain is outside working. So this is really as in changing. So basically, the women's who are listening to us, they need to realize we have some kind of a stigma with us, which is we need to look into it. Like Nadeem was already mentioned, when he comes home, we don't expect everything a woman should do. Probably she's going through with loads of other traumas in the house and things like this, because we came from outside and we expecting anything done by women's. So I think we try to address majority of Asian who listening to us. If you expect something from your wives and women's in your home, then you should really change your behavior as well as certain things. So Shamoon, you want to take that discussion slightly further down?
Yeah, what I would like to draw the attention to is the way people think. We are coming back to that because the men's expectations are not the reason there is it escalates to the point where there is a third party that needs to be involved, or where there is external help needed, is because men don't tend to communicate same way the women do. So women understand men if they would communicate clearly to them, but men are not able to communicate to them because we are taught right from the offset that, be a man, don't cry, stop talking about your feelings, things like that, right? So, and this is again, like I'm going with all the society overall, I'm not going with just South Asian men, right? So there is a sense of entitlement, but there is also a sense of I do not need to explain how I feel, and I do not need to explain what I think. You should already know what you're supposed to do. right? And that also creates a fracture in the relationship, right? Resulting in external parties being involved. Now, the the challenge we have is in this show, through this show, what we're trying to do is we want to show the men that they should communicate to their wives. They should bring their points forward so that she can sympathize and understand them. On the other hand, we are also giving an opportunity to, because majority of the men would not talk about these issues. They would not voice their feelings because it's not man-like to do that. So we are giving opportunity to women to be able to hear that what their husbands might be thinking or might be feeling, right? I'm in no way saying that society is fair, and I'm not saying that the behaviors where man thinks that we are entitled for everything is correct, right? It's definitely not right. In current society, women are working. Most households are dual income households. So both husband and wife are working, but there is expectation from man that he comes back and he wants the food to be ready, right? Or he wants the wife to take care of the kids, right? So that expectation is there, but how is this being communicated? Are they talking? Are they sitting and talking? Are they addressing their concerns? Right? And you having management experience and dealing with the people in the company. So as I said, it's like a small company. Yes, we don't have policies and standards, but the communication is what develops the policies and standards, right? So in companies and organizations, we have meetings, right? We have meetings that discuss what policies and standards would work in certain project, right? Just like that in a household, let's imagine a newly married household. How can they bring their household to an effective, well-tuned machine that they both are good for each other, right? How can we get to that point? So I'll ask you that now.
I think there's quite a few things I wanted to touch on. In terms of that particular point, I think when they're starting out, it's not too difficult. When they're starting out, it's it's very natural. Naturally, newlywed is what's called honeymoon period. They always have a honeymoon period. Sometimes that honeymoon period lasts for 1 year, may last for 2 years, maybe three. I don't know. And for some lucky couples, for some good couples, it lasts for their lifetime. They still remain romantic to their last day on earth. So how do we keep that going is basically you have to look at learning to communicate each other's needs and learning to be able to accept from each other that we have different needs. And we look at which needs work and which needs don't work, which needs are going to cause conflict, which needs are going to create tension, to try and park those needs away or move away from those kind of needs and change those things. See if there's anything that can replace them. So, so for instance, a man has probably a need for adventure, some risk taking, maybe wants to do things in that particular way. The wife may want to do other things. So take turns in doing things for what they like, each other different like. They should take turns. So nobody has a monopoly on their way, but they both try out each other's different ways, what they like doing. So if the wife likes to go out to watch pictures, the man should accompany her and support her and value that. If the man wants to go out for a nature walk in the hills or something, then his wife, should accompany him and go out and do things like that. So it's doing things together and keeping in touch with each other and communicating with each other in having regular communication with each other. So that's in terms of communication. But behind that, Shamoon, what's interesting both in organizations and within the household is actually within, if we specifically focus in on any household, it always has everything. The behavior is what we're looking at changing, aren't we? So we're expecting people who are watching this program to reflect upon their behavior and how they can change their behavior. Now, science has shown that in order to change your habits, it takes about 40 to 60 days of changing one habit. So in other words, for about 40 days, you keep on doing that one thing, and then it becomes a habit. Okay, after 40 or 60 days, sometimes they say 40 days, sometimes they say 60. So it takes about 40 to 60 days to change that habit. Now, we use some of this in change management. Okay, so the thing is that in the household, human beings, they're going to take that amount of time to have new habits. But behind the new habits, why should somebody change their habits? What makes somebody change something is their belief structure, is what they subconsciously are believing in all the time. So we do actually have policies that operate at home, but we tend not to implement those policies. So for instance, right, with a Muslim household, there is a moral framework. That moral framework is dictated to them by the Quran. Now they have a choice whether they follow that moral framework or they don't. Now, if you look at the practice of the Holy Prophet married somebody who was 15 years older than him, and she was a widower. She'd already been married once. Now you try saying that to some families. Why can't your son marry somebody who's 40 years old? Do you see? And their parents will sort of say, no. Our son is not going to marry somebody who's 40 years old. He's only 25. Why should we allow him to marry somebody? And then the 40-year-old, not only was the 40-year-old a widower, she was also a businesswoman, and she proposed to him. He didn't propose to her. She proposed to him. She asked him for marriage. Do you see? So if we go by that moral framework is totally against what some of the cultures that we have in Muslim societies and in Asian societies. It goes against totally their culture. And
See, that's
thinking, well, which framework are you operating then?
See, that's the problem, right? In Muslim culture, I'm not talking about religion now.
No, culture.
You notice I mentioned Muslim culture. The reason I say culture is because culture is amalgamation of few different things, right?
Yes.
It has a little bit of religion side, but it also has cultural side, right? So what has happened is, like, society, for example, you do see TV shows and dramas and whatnot in society we are living in, right? North American society, UK, US, Canada, you're only allowed to marry one person, right? Pakistan, you're allowed to marry for multiple women, right? With permission now. Before that was not required. Islamically, according to Hadith, you're allowed to have 4 wives, right? According to Quran, you can marry 1 or 2 or 3 or 4 women, right? Just same as that, like, we talk about that, right? Men tend to talk about that and justify being able to marry more women, but they would never talk about marrying an older woman.
Absolutely.
Right?
Absolutely. Yeah.
So we're picking and choosing. We're cherry picking.
Yeah. It's basically called selective reasoning. They use selective verses from the Quran, or they use selective verses from these to actually justify their particular point of view. But you're absolutely right. What my point is whatever framework you use, there is a moral framework that exists. Even if you're atheist, there is a moral frame that exists. That atheist has a set of beliefs by which he or she operates. So for me, it's what is the moral framework according to which they're operating, or they'd like to operate. So because what they do is they jump in and out of the moral framework, as you quite rightly say, when it suits and justifies their purpose, they jump into the moral framework. When it doesn't, they jump out of the moral framework. And they keep on going in and out of the framework. So that causes a lot. And I think that's where I think we have to, I also, I have another job as well with as part of my consultancy work, I also work with a mental health organization. So part of the thing is about trying to, if you like, look at changing some of that behavior and look at sort of saying, changing some of those beliefs. And those beliefs can only be changed by giving them information about different ways of thinking about certain things, and constantly sort of advising them and constantly repeating that information to them. So in a way that, they begin to understand and begin to go that line, but they themselves have got to make that choice within themselves. Do they want if they want a better marriage relationship, they're going to have to do certain things themselves. Right. So it always also, in terms of not only do they have a moral framework which they need to connect with a bit better, but they also need to look at what it is that they want. Sometimes I found with certain couples, when I've sat with one or two couples and I've had to intervene with one or two couples, I've basically had to say to the husband, how is it that you would like things to be? And then I would ask the wife, how is it that you would like things to be? And they would sort of say, oh, well, he did this to me and she did this to me. I said, no. That's happened in the past. What I want to know is the future. And sometimes couples are not very good at doing that because they've got so tangled with the past. They're so embedded with the past. It's hurt them. They're both feeling hurt. And I can understand that. But the time comes when they have to sort of say, right, stop. What is it? How can we move further? And they're not very good at that. So you sometimes have to tell men, come on, what is it? Your responsibility. In a Muslim household, generally, from the Muslim framework, the man is held responsible. So you're responsible. You're the leader. How are you going to make things better? Right? So you have to make a choice. Okay. And if you know that your wife has these kind of behaviors, how is it that you're going to work with those behaviors? Do you want to still stay in the relationship? And if you want to stay in the relationship, then you might have to do make some changes within your behavior. So it depends on what they want as well. So sometimes they're not very, very, if you like, forthcoming with what they want. And that tells you that sometimes they're not willing to change. And you sort of say, look, what is it that you want? And I'm going to pest. And the third party must pin them down to ask them why. What is it that you want from this relationship? How would you like the relationship to be? And then we can look at sort of saying, right, okay, we can meet that, we can't meet that. And then it's a question of negotiation. And don't forget, in Islam, marriage is a contract, right? So there is a negotiation to be had, even after the marriage, when it breaks down.
Marriage is contract regardless. It is a contract regardless.
Yeah.
You guys let me in, right? Okay. Basically, the question you guys have in, right? Okay.
My apologies. No.
It's not. Okay. I'm just trying to instigate something else here now. Okay. When I was listening to both of you guys, I try to get thinking of loads of other men, how they think. My whole purpose is to day-to-day issues are with the Asian families or even the English families, what they are. Being a man with 3-4 citizens, right? We were talking what we expect from a women's. Obviously, Nadeem has his expertise. Shamoon also do this type of a work. So you have experience. You can really highlight things. And Nadeem given example is very good one when you sit down and tell them, if you want to carry on with this relationship, what do you want for that relationship? Then you can probably resolve a lot of issues, making everybody realize you are fighting for the wrong things, should do together for the right things. This debate is such a big debate. It opens so many other venues where I think a lot of people don't talk about it. And I personally think this type of programs, it can be really helpful for loads of peoples, right? Okay. So that's why there's a lot of discussion coming out within the discussions, which is actually the norms, like people are using religion uh, for their purposes. When it doesn't suit them, they jump out there, right? Okay. But we need to find some way, some kind of a balance, how far anybody can go and that justification can be acceptable. Because look, we were talking about two peoples getting together and everybody have their say. So uh, loads of questions raising, like you guys are saying, Islam is saying you can marriage a woman who's older than you, right? And in English culture, I've seen, obviously they don't follow the way we do, but there's loads of relationships, sometimes the older women's and the young men's. Because we have a stigma type, we think, oh, bloody hell, what they're doing. Look at what this old lady doing. What is the older man doing with the young girl, right? Okay. But their relationship is quite ideal. It can be very fruitful as well. Right? So why I'm really saying, because our society has made norms. The norms is should be same age, 2-3 years difference, no problem, right? Anybody who gets married with the older person, either as a man or a woman, is always people make a stigma type.
Yes.
My point is, what should we do? If we can even have this point and talk about it, and try to find the answers for it, right? But I'm not going, because this subject is going somewhere else. I will stick to what men thinks about with the women's. Then women listen to it. But I think out of that discussion, this point, what Nadeem said, our prophet was married a woman who was a lot older than her, with him, and the relationship was the ideal. I'm not going into that debate. Then he married a woman. She was Aisha. I was 11, 12 year old, and he was quite older. So it's quite big, versatile subject, because we think anybody who's older than you shouldn't be married is the same. So we need to talk about that. But that's for the next subject. Uh, Shamoon, I think we try to finish this program. What men's thinks that women's, and then we'll try to jump into another things. There is somebody's put some kind of a comment. I just want to see. There's a comments you want to read through, because some of our views have the
I
questions.
can't. Yeah, I can't see the comments.
I'm
All right,
going
here we
to show you now.
go. All right.
Right. Okay. You guys read it, and then Shamoon, I'll let you read it, and then obviously somebody asked the question.
Yeah, so it's but Islam always allows a woman to pursue someone. The actual problem is that mostly people don't study their religion. I appreciate
That's
Niaden to bring such a good subject in the program.
yeah, yeah.
So,
Sorry, Shamoon, if I can just jump in.
yeah, no, go
The
ahead, go ahead.
yeah, the thing with I totally agree with that comment. That's exactly what my point was, to sort of say people sort of connect with the moral framework when it suits them, and they disconnect when it doesn't suit them. And sometimes they do know these things. If I can say it to Safina, who's written it, they sometimes do know these things, and they deliberately disconnect with a framework because it doesn't justify their argument. Okay, and
Yeah.
sometimes, yes, you're right, Safina. They will, you have to give them the benefit of the doubt. They do not know. They just haven't had that information, but somebody has come along and given that information, and they've changed. Those are the people that will change. The people who genuinely did not know. But the people who did know about it but deliberately were hiding it, they're probably the ones that you'll find that they won't change, because they knew, but they did it deliberately to disconnect from that framework because it didn't justify their argument. I think in terms that particular comment, so that's my thing on the comment. In terms of how we again, it's information about how people in a relationship, what it's down to education again. Whichever way you look at it, it's down to education. The more information that you can provide for couples in that kind of situation, or any couples generally, and let them know where they can access this information from if they're in trouble, then they need to be aware that information is out there that's available to them that they can actually learn from. So for instance, right, in terms of the moral frameworks, the information is there. In terms of them changing their behavior, they need to look at how other couples have done. So in the case of, let me give you an example. In the case
So
of
before you
African
go
culture,
further,
yeah,
I would disagree with you. Let
go
me
on,
finish the point.
you disagree then. Disagree.
Okay. So
Okay.
the reason I disagree with you in this case is, in this particular instance, is because before we even go to searching for the information or providing them the information, there has to be addressed need for that information. So it's just like, if they don't want to fix the relationship, they don't need the information.
No.
They just want out from the relationship,
That's okay.
right?
That's okay too. Yep, that's okay too.
Yeah.
There's no what I'm looking at is where they've decided they want to have something of a relationship, and where can they go in that respect. So they've decided they want to be together. In some cases, they've decided they don't want, and they don't want to know. That's fine too. I mean, that's their decision and that's their choice. They have that. I think for when you've tried everything, you've given them all the information, and they've still decided they're not interested. Fine, that's okay. That's their choice. My thing is for those couples who do want to make their marriage succeed, who do want to have a healthy married life, there is information out there. Yeah, it's simple things like, in African cultures, I don't know whether Faheem knows this, in African cultures, having 4 wives is very normal for them. And even the first wife will go out with the husband, and it's tradition in those cultures that the first wife goes out searching for the next wife, for the husband. Because in their culture, they believe, this is the way forward. So sometimes it's how people are brought up. Now we have come into Western culture, and so we've adopted certain Western cultural norms as well. So those kind of things are in our head, whether we like it or not. They're part of us now. So the thing is that sometimes that happens as well. But there are people in terms of older and younger relationships. You ask the women, the younger women who marry the older men, how they feel, and you'd be interested. There's lots of, you can go on YouTube. There's lots of information about how younger women feel about marrying older men, and they have their views, and some of them are very loving. The Holy Prophet was very loving towards Hazrat Khatija, even after she passed away. She was still number one when it came to remembering her, and the other women used to sort of say, is Hazrat Khatija the only woman that the Prophet has ever married? Where are we in this? And the Holy Prophet always used to fondly remember her. So for me, the thing is that there is information out there of how other people behave in these kind of situations. Or an older woman marries a younger man. There are examples in Muslim culture. There are examples in Asian culture of those marriages. So maybe learning from them as well as to how they're coping. And some of them are very successful marriages, Shamoon. They're very, very successful. Especially I've seen where there's a 20-year age gap between the two couples, and they've had a very, very successful marriage. Interestingly, Shamoon, it's also in Irish culture. I've seen differences where they've had 20 years in Irish culture. Difference. They do not. For them, they don't think about it. Yeah, to them it's not an issue. Yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
I want to come in again because every point you guys are making, there's always the questions coming out of it, which is I'm saying this debate is a very big debate because
It's a vast subject.
right. It is, and I think we need to do a bit more programs to people to understand what we're trying to get. If we find some ladies to come along, fair enough. We can put that point of view across. At the moment, because we're a man, we're sitting. Like, okay, when you guys are debating in there was a question came into my mind, which is it's quite true, which is I heard men's because we are all human. I mean, if it's young people are watching, I don't have a problem because we are talking about men's are slightly more highly sexual than the women's are. Majority might be some women's are, but exceptional. But men's sexual drive is more than women's are, and also uh, in UK, even the world generation, you find more women's and less men's. The way things are. I mean, if you go into Nottingham City, I used to heard in a younger age, people were really, the youth is looking. It's a 7 women equal to a man. So you can imagine if it's in a city, 1 man and 7 women's, so big numbers for women's, then you've got to have these problems coming along. You have to be really sort this problem out.
Yeah.
So I think if you really looking at it scientifically, our religion also giving you the ways, and also, I don't know either you believe it or not. I find men's are actually a more highly sexual than the women's are, or women's you find they are, but mainly men's are, and because of that is a natural instincts, right? Okay, and then you really have to put a balance in there as well. So age doesn't matter in a way, but saying that our culture, society said, oh, bloody hell, this guy's got 2 marriages, like you saying African culture, even the women's going finding another women for a man, which is, I'm not saying, it might be some man that say, bloody hell, I should be African to do that. But what I'm really saying here, but there is some kind of a sense of reality in there. And if we bring morality, reality, and the people's genetic, I think we can solve a lot of problems out. And there's a lot of our sisters, daughters, women who are listening to us, they might relate to it, and then very easy for them to understand that instead of you really look for a British norm or the normal culture norms, they are actually very against it. So I think this kind of a debate is very good. You want to carry on with that debate because I think is the next program will probably bring a bit more wider to it, or we can do some other things. But I think these things need to be looked into on every angle. What do you say, Nadeem and Shamoon, I'll leave it to you guys.
Yeah. I think you said first of all that the subject is vast, and I think it is vast. You can have nearly every program on this subject, and you still won't finish
Yes.
because it's so big, you know. And I think it's entirely up to yourselves and your programming schedule as to how you want to move forward on this particular subject. I think you can give it a special slot, so we can give it a special program of its own, rather than being part of sort of an ongoing discussion, because this is part of Shamoon's area. So Shamoon will have his own subject areas that he may wish to sort of put forward. So, but this as a subject, it might, because it's vast, it may need a special program just on its own all the time. So every week we just discuss this particular. That's I don't know about how Shamoon feels, because I think Shamoon's already got this particular slot here. So, you know, he's got his own subject areas. Yeah.
Can I just come in? I think when we talk about subject, if the subject is vast, we'll do 2 3 programs. Initially, when you really cover all the ends, then you go to the next subject. I mean, we can easily do that. But
Okay.
what I'm saying, these things are actually quite related with every humankind,
Sure.
English, Asian, Africans, whoever it is, they all come across with these kind of issues, and where we can make some of the men's to realize not to cross the line, and there's loads of women's to realize what the men's needs are. And then, if you really understand that, you can have a better attitude toward it. Shaboon, I'll bring it to you.
Yeah, so see, the thing is, like, questions that I want to ask, sometimes I have to be careful not to ask those questions because, you know, we all know that, our wives and, friends and everyone is watching this, right? So we still have that, kind of restriction as to what we can say and cannot say in terms of what we feel. And what I'm trying to bring to the forefront is how actually men feel. So fill that communication gap, build that bridge so that it can help the relationships, so the men can voice their feelings without being penalized for it or feeling that they won't be real men if they actually talk about their feelings, right? Because I have been in relationships where I have been told that, oh, you don't tell me that you love me. You don't tell me how you feel about me. You don't tell me how you think about me, right? And I'm pretty sure all of us have been in those situations because we are just not accustomed to, show our emotions as a man, right? On the other hand, a woman would have very comfortable time telling you how much she loves you, right?
Yeah.
So this is where I want to bring it to, because this is what's not talked about, right?
Sure.
We can talk about the mediation between couples. We can talk about how to raise the children. We can talk about all of those things, right? And we can talk about the expectations that men have, right? As to what they want from their wives versus what they get,
Yes.
and what socially is acceptable for them to get from their wives,
Yes.
right? Because these are all different things.
Yes.
What they want versus what they get versus what they're socially acceptable to get, right? So I have no issue like discussing these things further, but I think the program should be more concentrated toward one particular aspect of these things, right? So if we're talking about men's emotions in a physical relationship or emotional relationship, then we only talk about that. If we are talking about married relationship where men are involved with a wife, then we should only talk about that. If we are talking about men marrying multiple wives and what men think about it, then we should only talk about that. So we can do a number of shows on this, and because it's a worthy topic, which actually provides a social, uplifting for people.
Yeah, it's an information source. It's a source of information. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And I do realize, like I was concerned that just as I'm talking, right? Last program we were talking about with Mr. Malik is that he was asking me, so did you get in trouble for all the things you said, right? And I kept laughing. right? I kept laughing because yes, I did get in trouble.
Oh yeah,
I
oh
was asked a
no.
number of questions,
Oh
but
no.
you know what? Like this is what it is. We
Yeah,
gotta
I
talk.
assure you, I won't be in trouble.
But
But
that's the
then I
thing,
was
right?
then I was a former politician as well. So
Yeah. No, I have dabbled in politics too. I ran for
all
city
right.
councilor in 2010.
Okay.
Uh, yeah, so
Yeah,
I have done a little bit of political work, not as much as you, obviously,
yeah,
but yeah, I've dabbled into it.
yeah. Mine
So
was 20 years before yours. So yes,
yeah,
just
so you
slightly,
have
just like
much more
yeah,
experience than I do,
slightly,
right?
yeah, yeah.
But hey, my wife did have questions. She was satisfied with my answers,
Sure.
and that's where we are at, right? Men would not communicate.
Yeah.
They won't say anything.
Yeah. I have to say, Shamoon, it's not an age thing. I know elderly people can get it wrong as well, and sometimes there is something that we can learn from younger people, and we need to know that because I look at what works, and if somebody's found something that works, that's beneficial to me. I shouldn't bother whether that's a young person or an older person. Just take it. There's good, and
Yeah,
I'm open because sometimes because young people are more in tune with their with the modern age, they're more in tune with technology. They may have some better ideas as to how to cope with all of that, and then their relationships as well. In some cases, so some of them do. In some cases, they millennials are known to struggle with relationships as well. So there's a general now perception amongst sort of people who look at millennials and they sort of say millennials are having they struggle with relationships because technology has made it so easy for them to if they don't want to be friends with anybody, they just unfriend them on Facebook and that's it.
yeah,
End of friendship. If
yeah,
if um if I don't want to talk to my girlfriend anymore, I don't text her and I totally ignore her texts. So this is now the way relation. I don't sit down and talk to her and sort of say this is I want to move on. I'm not interested anymore. It's a question. I just put it on the text. I not even text her. I'll just ignore her text altogether, and that's
yeah,
it. Do you see what I mean? So
yeah,
there's a bit of difference in how we put and those kind of attitudes. They actually also they then come into the other cultures as well. So in Asian culture, they will have that as well. If they don't want to be friends with anybody, they have the same technology. They're having the same attitudes. The same behaviors are now being formed as well. So in our cases, we have a very one of my belief is that because we have a very strong moral framework, that is still very much of an opportunity for us to be able to put things right. But the general principle for me, what I want to sort of lead, what I want people to take from my talk or from our talk tonight is always be the person who can make things better. How can you make things better? And if that means looking into yourself first, then that means looking into yourself first. Every good leader needs to know themselves first. If they don't know themselves first, they will not be able to manage their team effectively. They will not be able to relate to their team members. And you have to see your wife as your partner in this team, and you have to move together. But you have to be the one that says first, how can I make things better? And always look for the positive aspects within your partner. Even amongst all the negativity, still try and search out the positive aspect within your partner. Always look for that positive, and that's a mindset change that you have to develop. But as a principle, if anybody wants to go away with something tonight, is always look for the possible and always be the one that says, "How can I make things better, even if things are wrong?" Okay. So those two.
okay.
Yeah.
For me, like based
Yeah.
on what you just said, I'm just gonna conclude, and then Mr. Malik is gonna give his last word. So I'm just gonna say that marriage or relationship is a two-way street, right?
Sure.
Uh, we may feel that we have upper hand because there are a million other people available to us, but that same thing applies to our partners, right? At the same time, it's also a commitment. So where it's not like a company or organization, if you don't like a company, you don't like your job, you should leave it because you're not happy. But if you have married someone, you have made a commitment to be with them and support them and be with them in good and bad, you know, in their good times and in their bad times, be with them, So which means that you have to do a little bit of give and take. And it's a two-way street. You need to understand them just as much as they need to understand you. So, and that can only happen through communication. So working on your communication is utmost priority for any relationship, in my point of view. That's what I'm getting from
Good.
this program.
Excellent, excellent,
Thank
excellent.
you.
Very good.
Right. Okay, this program is actually run over the hours, right? Okay. The program, I'm trying to conclude here. Uh, Especially, I think if there's any ladies who's watching it, they will have a little bit understanding what men expect from their wives and the family. Also, there's loads of point, as in Nadeem in the end raised, the modern technology and all this new technologies coming in every human's life. They also creating loads of issues. And when, say for example, I have a difference with you, Shamoon, uh, you and me sitting face to face and having a go is a bit more practical and more visible, especially where is the relationship involved, right? And it's very silly if I send a text, Shamoon, I don't want to see your face anymore, right? So it's not really very kind of a good thing. It's technology also giving ignorance and a problem in the human life. I think this is also a worrying sign. As I said early on, this making a lot of points coming out of it. But in the end, I'm concluding this program. I think most of men who feel about their wives and the family, if they watch, they probably have a little bit more understanding. If in future, if they have any questions, they can ask us the next program. We can really try to address that to find some kind of commonality where it as a human being, men's and women's together and keeping society good and safe, not the better one. So I'm just going to conclude into that. Good discussion, and Nadeem Qureshi, very nice of you to coming into the program. Shamoon, as usual, you put your point of view across. So, inshallah, next program we'll probably choose the subject. I think is surrounding that area or might be new, but we can talk on these issues on a different type of issues as well. Like Shamoon said, we can pick up one subject and then we'll talk about it. And I think we will do something, give back to society, and we should do that. And that's what we need to try.
Very
And
good.
thank you everybody watching Nayadin TV. Inshallah, we will see you next Saturday, 7 to 8 UK time. I leave that to Shamoon. Canadian time might be the afternoon.
Yeah, 2 to 3 Canadian time.
Yeah, and I can see there's a lot of sun onto Shamoon's beard. He looks like a very old man because of that. So I'm gonna finish that program. Thank you, everybody watching the program. Inshallah, we'll see you next Saturday. Hopefully, Nadeem will be available and will have all this Nadeem experience to come very useful for some people.
If
So
you let me know the subject in advance, that'd be
yeah,
good.
yeah, we will do that.
Okay.
We will do that. So we're taking permission from everybody to go away. Thank you very much. Everybody watch
Thank
Nihal
you.
TV.
Yeah.
Shukriya.
Thank you
Thank you.
to